Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Empower. Today, I have a very special guest, Nereyda Esparza. Welcome to Empower. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Luis. Thanks for having me on.
Nereyda, for those people who don't know you, can you please start talking about you, your background, and yeah, like some of the stuff that you have done and you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share a little bit about myself. And you'll have to forgive me because I tend to be a little bit long-winded, but I'll try to be concise. Nereyda, I'm originally from Texas. I was born and raised on the Mexican-American border. If you think about Texas on the southernmost tip, in a place called McAllen. And I spent a lot of time traveling when I was a very young girl between Mexico and the United States. And I had family on both sides. And growing up in this area gave me like this super passion for politics and international relations and development studies. So when I left the Valley, the Rio Grande Valley, and I went to Smith College, which is a women's college in New England, that's what I decided to study. I studied the Latin America region with a specific focus on economics and development studies. And I had a blast. It was a really informative experience for me being at an all women's college. And one of my professors there encouraged me to go to Oxford, and I thought that was like an impossible dream. I was like, Oxford, like, why would I, they would never accept me, right? Like, well, that's not even a possibility. But he really encouraged me, and I decided to take the leap and go to the University of Oxford straight out of Smith. And I continued to study international relations with a focus in Latin America. So I graduated in 2011 and started working in London at
Mhm.
a political risk consulting firm called GPW. I did a lot of due diligence work for them. And I had that kind of moment, that realization as a young graduate, what do I actually want to do with my life? What do I care about? What am I passionate about? And I realized that what I really wanted to be was in a more mission driven role. And I wanted to be super focused on education because that's how I had become kind of, been exposed to so much of the world through the power of my education. I was very lucky that I was able to go to these places. And so I refocused my career to education. I joined a company called Pearson right
Mhm.
out of London. The year that I applied, there was, I think, 685 applicants for a leadership program. And
Mhm.
I was very lucky. I got one of those 15 spots. So
Mhm.
I joined the Pearson Leadership Development Program, and that's where I got to meet a lot of senior executives. I got to learn a lot of different roles. And I stayed in ed tech all the way up to Amazon. Amazon was hiring for customer success managers in the ed tech space in a company that they had acquired. And I stayed at Amazon throughout my early professional services
Mhm.
career. And that's how I moved into big tech, right? From Amazon, I went to Facebook. And then finally from Facebook to General Assembly, which is my last role, managing the customer success team. So I'll pause there, but that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, so going back to where everything started, you were in Oxford, and then your first job after Oxford was Pearson, correct?
No, it was the small consulting firm,
Oh, yeah,
GPW,
that's true. And then Pearson, right?
and then Pearson,
I would like
right?
to know more about that experience in Pearson because for those people who don't know, like, I mean, I don't know that much about Pearson, but what I know is that I have done a lot of assignments through Pearson. So if you can tell me more about that job and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it was a really just, I think when I think about my career, like what were the big things that, had a big impact in my career? Pearson was definitely one of them. I'll tell you two quick stories, but Pearson, as you know, is a large education company. It's one of the largest education companies on the planet, primarily through materials and examinations and licensing. But at the time that the leadership development program was founded, they were really looking to kind of digitize, right? Like move away from just textbooks and licensing to really providing all sorts of digital assets and solutions for
Mhm.
modern learning. So they took a chance in bringing in some new talent, some young talent, who were obviously, very bright, very competitive.
Mhm.
And at the time, what I knew was that I, wanted to work in education, but I didn't quite have the corporate experience or the exposure. So a lot of different companies do this. I know you're getting your MBA,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of different types of MBA rotational kind of leadership programs, and that's how I came to Pearson, because they kind of took the initiative to figure out how are we going to bring in some fresh new talent that's going to help us kind of start to digitize some of our new products and solutions. And so I joined through that program. But what was really cool about that was when you're thinking about your career and how to excel and move up in an organization, you really want to start to build relationships, right, with senior executives that will give you a little bit of not just the visibility, because I think that's important, but
Mhm.
equally like the opportunities, right, to work on projects that really make an impact, right? So I remember you interviewed the VP of marketing at FedEx, and he was
Mhm.
talking about having access to projects, right? Like introducing shipping to all the, all of the copy locations. And for me, it was about working on products and that were going to be available in a digital format for students. But the way it really made an impact was, and I'll pause in a second, but I met this phenomenal leader called Lisa Lewin, and she later became the CEO of General Assembly.
Mhm.
And so when I was at Facebook and looking for my next opportunity, I remember getting a message from the formidable Lisa Lewin, and she said,
Mhm.
Nereyda, I remember you from Pearson. We used to work together, and I am now the CEO, and I'm looking to bring on some new talent to the organization. And I was honored, and that's how I ended up coming to GA.
Oh, so it was about networking, right?
Exactly right. It was a little bit of that, knowing your network and doing the work so that you are remembered, right, for the impact that you're having.
Yeah, because many people always say like, yeah, you need to network, but then like you need to be prepared at the same time. And of course, like the thing is that people think that if you know people, that's all that matters. But these people aren't gonna waste their time if you cannot contribute with anything, right? And that was something like the VP of FedEx was telling me like in one of his classes. He would be saying like it's not about who you know, but it's also about like the value that you can add to them, because like if you know me but if you cannot contribute with anything, I'm not going to give you an opportunity. You have to earn it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I always coach when I coach younger folks, I always tell them, you know, absolutely ask for a mentor, right? A mentor is someone that you can have a really personal, like one-to-one conversation and relationship with. But really, what you want to also have in your career is a sponsor, is someone that's going to elevate your career, put you in
Mhm.
front of those people, those projects, those situations, right, that are going to get you to that next level.
Mhm.
And so I've had many mentors in my life who I'm incredibly grateful for, but I would consider someone like Lisa or even my last boss, right, as more of a sponsor, right? Someone who can really kind of like propel your career. There's a great book I always recommend by Sylvia Ann Hewitt called How to Find a Sponsor. So definitely Google that for anyone who's looking for sponsorship.
How to find a sponsor. Okay, I just wrote it down. And moving to your next job, Facebook, can you tell me about your experience working for Facebook and the role that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. I had I'll tell you why I came to Facebook in the first place and then what I was doing. But I remember, at Amazon, I had the phenomenal experience of working at Amazon Business. And if you're not familiar with Amazon Business, they're a massive part of Amazon.com. They're kind of like the B2B enterprise version of Amazon.com. So this is organizations that want to, like, buy supplies or, manage their procurement systems through Amazon. They go through Amazon Business. But what it meant for me was that although I found the work really, challenging, most of the time I was working with, procurement suppliers, and I was talking about like paper and staplers and toner and IT peripherals. And although that's interesting, like I was ready to try something totally different and very new. So I moved to Facebook and joined their global operations team, which is specifically focused on trust and safety. So if you think about, all of the different controls that Facebook has to adhere to in order to make sure that the users are safe, that's the department I was working on. My role specifically, I was a program manager, so I was working very closely with engineering and product teams that were launching new features to Facebook's global vendors.
Okay.
These are the vendors that essentially enforce the policies for trust and safety. So it was a really great role. I wasn't doing any like immediate content review, but I was working with some pretty heavy topics around trust and safety, right? So things like graphic violence, right? And all sorts of, different types of very intense themes, as you can imagine, around how to moderate Facebook.
What are some of these things or features that you were part of when it comes to implementing new initiatives that we as user can see in the platform?
I don't know if it was anything that you would see on the platform, right? So there's a lot of like products that, yes, absolutely, like, you're talking about checks, or if you get locked out of your account, right? And you have to like submit a picture of your ID, for example, things like that. Those would go through my department as well. But I think the thing that I'm most proud of, working on was essentially a quality system for the types of content that gets passed on the platform. So what I mean by that is, when something gets reported on Facebook, you want to make sure that the reviewers who are actually looking at that material are not just taking down whatever, right? They're taking down the correct stuff, and that they're actually labeling it for what it is. So if something is hate speech, for example, you took it down as hate speech, that it was correctly taken down and correctly labeled, so that the AI, the machine learning, is actually improving and understanding what it is that it's taking down and labeling. So we had a quality system to ensure that everything that is not only out of everything that gets taken down, was that correct? And out of everything that, actually existed, was it actually labeled appropriately? And that's actually a very hard engineering thing to do at Facebook.
Does Facebook follow an agenda or a set of values? Because sometimes it's like, how can Facebook can determine what is right and what is wrong? Because some content is banned, some other content it's not. So what are like the values that Facebook has to determine what is right and what is wrong?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's community standards, right, which we can all understand are like pretty universal, right? Like, for example, if you nudity, for example, nudity and pornography, that's pretty straightforward, right? Most people are not, the community standards are very clear around the policies around, things like that. I think for hate speech specifically, hate speech is really difficult, right? So I just gave you two examples: nudity and pornography and hate speech. I think with NP, nudity, pornography is called NP. With NP, it's with the accuracy that a machine can take down those types of images or text or whatever, video, etc., is very precise, right? Almost like to the 10th degree precision. But for something like hate speech, it really relies on the context, right? Like the country that you're in, the language that you're in,
Mhm.
the standards around the policies regarding all of this work. And I think what Facebook has done a really amazing, tremendous job is not just relying on themselves, but also having governing bodies,
Yeah.
also having a board to really help them, sometimes even break ties around some pressing issues and pressing content. I wasn't involved as much in that side, right, of like creating the policy, but more so making sure that all of our teams were following the existing policies, and the policies get updated, right? The world is
Yeah.
changing. There's literally, millions, billions of content out there. And so the policies themselves get updated to make sure that they're reflecting what's necessary for the users.
Yeah, the only time that I post something that was under sensitive content was when I took a picture of myself when I had the accident and my face was like all demolished.
Yes.
And
Oh
then
my
Facebook
God.
was covering it. And I was like, damn, that was bad, probably, So that was the only time. And I was like, interesting because I didn't know that it was for something like that as well.
Right. Because you had such a terrible accident. I remember seeing the photos, and yeah, you looked, pretty what Facebook would consider graphic, right? And so they
Uh-huh.
want to protect it for people who don't want to maybe see blood or whatever, right?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's a good example.
And moving to your next job, Amazon, it's one of the biggest companies in the world and is expanding in many different areas. Can you please tell me about your experiences, some anecdotes that you probably had there working for Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, I loved Amazon. I think it was when you're really thinking about a company at scale, you can't do it better than at Amazon and Facebook, right? But Amazon, specifically from its infrastructure and its reach, was just an invaluable experience. My favorite job, because I had several jobs at Amazon, all within professional services and customer success, but my favorite job was 10 Marks, which is that ed tech company that they had acquired. And I just thought it was one of the most fun jobs I've ever had, because I had to work with superintendents across the entire nation, helping them improve their math scores. The program itself was for math
Mm-hmm.
um, in K through 12. And one of my favorite things was seeing the program actually translated into Spanish, because
Okay.
I remember being in school learning English when I was a little girl and being in ESL classes and not having access to the tools and the resources in a bilingual format, right? When I was a child.
Uh-huh.
And so to be able to be part of something that was not only a great product, but also being introduced in Spanish for ESL learners, I thought was phenomenal. And again, just being able to work with teachers and fly around the country and deliver trainings in person and have that like real like tactile one-on-one experience was
Mhm.
amazing. And I'll tell you this, my anecdote was meeting my best friend. Her name is Sasha, and she's brilliant. We met at 10 Marks. She stayed at Amazon even after I had left. And now she's a very senior product leader at PayPal, and one of the most ambitious, high achieving women I've ever met. And so it was kind of one of those places where you really learn a lot. You work really hard, you learn a lot, and you make some amazing friends.
Yeah. And how was it for you to manage teams? Because you were in charge of some people, I assume, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll tell you the truth, and I don't think it's any secret now. I'm officially I've left GA and I'm starting my next opportunity at BetterUp. But I'll tell you a quick story.
Mhm.
Um, so I mentioned Lisa Lewin, the former CEO of General Assembly, and at the time, we had an exploratory conversation, and she said to me, "What are you interested in doing? Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do next?" And I said, I really care a lot about what GA is doing, and I want to be involved in workforce solutions. And I have a lot of experience in customer success and in program management and operations. Those are my three niche, right? I could do ops, customer success, and I could do program management really well. And she said, "Great. how would you feel about leading the North American customer success team? And I said,
Okay.
wow, that's amazing, but I have no management experience, right?
Mhm.
Like I've worked with small teams before, and but I haven't actually taken on like a large organization.
Mhm.
And she said to me, "Oh, I think you'll be fine. I really need you to, obviously interview and go through the process, and we'll see if you're a good fit, but I think you'll be fine." And it was amazing to kind of have someone else tell me, "You could do it." Right? Like even without the experience, just being like, I have faith that you can actually do this well, and you've actually been doing much of this already. And I said, okay. So I went through the interview process. I met my former boss, Davinia Glia, who's an amazing woman. And I was very transparent throughout the interview process. I told him, like, this is what I've done, this is where I'm going, this is where my passions are, here's my skill set, here are my strengths, but I have no management experience, right?
Uh-huh.
And she said, I think you're going to be fine, right? Like we're going to help coach you and mentor you throughout this process, but you have that, that natural ability. And to me, the way that I describe that is I truly care about people, and I care about their development and their health and their well-being and their performance. I really want people to succeed. And that's something I demonstrated in my career. So I accepted the job. I got the job, and I became the director of customer success. And I remember my first day getting my org chart, Luis,
Mhm.
and I was looking for my name in the org chart because I'm like, where am I in this organization? I'm looking for my name. And I had to float my eyes to the top, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is my org. My name is at the very top. Like all of these
Mhm.
individuals are now reporting into me. And at the time, I had about 30 people and 6 different managers. And I realized, wow, I really kind of have to get with the program. I hired a coach, a professional coach. And I had an amazing manager at the time who really kind of helped prepare me through those pieces. But this is the way I'm answering your question is sometimes you just kind of have to take a big risk,
Uh-huh.
really prepare yourself, know that you can do it, surround yourself with people that are not going to let you fail, and really work your butt off. And I was at GA for 2 years. I went through everything in those 2 cycles. I've hired, I fired, I laid off. Unfortunately, this year I had a lot of invaluable experience at GA and managing people. It's something that I truly care about and I'm passionate
Mhm.
about. And it's something that I didn't know was
Mhm.
actually going to be a strength of mine until I took that big leap.
When you would be hiring people, what would you say would be the most amazing qualities that made you think I need to hire this person?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's so true.
Because sometimes when you see someone, you're like, oh, this person is a great fit, or sometimes you see someone and you're like, there's no way he's gonna or she's gonna be in this team, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really depends, I think, on the maturity of your organization, the role, right? Like what you're looking for, right? Like
Uh,
we think, for me, and specifically when I was hiring for customer success, I wasn't necessarily looking for the most experienced people, right? Like I didn't need someone who had been a captain of industry for 30 years.
mhm.
What I did need is folks who are great problem solvers, who are great team players, right? Who are not going to get frustrated when they don't get the answer right away, who are independent, right? I love people who don't have to be told what to do.
Mhm.
And it did help to have customer experience in the sense of being client facing, right? So another thing that I looked for was someone, does someone have experience working with clients? And even if the answer was no, it wasn't necessarily a full reject, right? But it was, do they have the skill sets to actually manage clients, are extremely organized, and again have those team player and problem solving skills. And with my team specifically, because it was a team on the slightly younger side, I could pair them. I could hire someone that maybe wasn't as experienced in customer success with someone with a manager who did have, right, several years of experience. I had someone on the team who has almost had a decade of experience in CS, and I could pair them under that individual, and I could see the tremendous learning and growth that could happen in a short amount of time. But that for every hiring manager, I think, you'll see themes around what they're looking for, but specifically for me, that's what I like to look for.
What would be some of the hardest questions that you would ask to these candidates?
I mean, really what I'm looking for is how they've handled previous situations. So I've always asked questions around, tell me about a difficult client problem that you had to solve. And I really ask a lot of follow-up questions to try to get specifically like, what was their contribution? What did they do as opposed to the team or the organization? My other favorite question that I like to ask is, I don't like the weaknesses question as much. Tell me about your weakness, because I think everyone can come up with some like goofy answer.
Uh-huh.
But I really do I like to ask, like, what are your strengths? Because if you really know what your strengths are, it's going to help me much more as a hiring manager and as a leader to kind of help position this person in the team. Like, yes, I need someone who loves data, or I need someone who's really good at negotiation and conflict resolution, or I need someone who's a little bit more like black hat strategic type of thing, or maybe I need someone who's like really good at risk management,
Uh-huh.
and I need to put them on the team. So those are the types of questions that I ask.
Okay. During all this time and like all your experiences, like all these jobs that you have had, do you also need to negotiate when it comes to contracts or other stuff? Is that part of your role?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think within the last year, normally, it really depends on the organization, but I've been, in my previous role at GA, I was very much client facing as well. I wasn't managing the individual account, but I would join calls and make sure that everything was going well for the clients. And because in customer success, a lot of the times you're in charge of the renewal, you're definitely going to be a very important partner to your sales counterpart, your account executive, and helping draft new contracts and amendments. And oftentimes it is a conversation, a little bit of a back and forth between yourself and the client around what do they need, how much do they need, by timelines, pricing, coming up with new pricing models if it's something that it's net new and we've never done before. So I've absolutely been part of those conversations. Yeah.
Okay, so we're about to finish this episode, but I want to ask you, what's the value that you have added to all these companies? If you can choose probably two or three things, like the most important things that you have contributed to these companies.
This is a very like a people say soft skills. We should stop calling them soft skills, because they're not exactly, they bring tremendous value. But I will say, I think as a millennial, the last few years have been really difficult, right? The job market has been up and down. We've gone through COVID. We had the Great Resignation. Now we're going through a big shakeup in the tech industry. I think the biggest value add that I've been able to bring is resilience, endurance, and a lot of empathy, right? And I think that's what has made me really passionate about joining teams, and being a part of leading those teams where I can, and just staying in mind that there's always a goal that we're trying to get to, and if we're going through a hard period, there's a light at this end of the tunnel, and it's about maintaining that vision and helping yourself, but also the people around you go through that experience. And I think I could say that at Facebook, at Amazon, at GA, really coming in with that positive attitude and ensuring that we can get to the other side together as a team. So don't bear it, and especially in sports, right? Endurance and resilience is really important, so you can play that long game.
Yeah. Well, Nereyda, thank you so much for being with me today. And something that I always do with all my guests are two things. The first one is, Okay, in this case, my previous guest was supposed to ask you a question, and then you're supposed to ask a question to my next guest.
Ah,
However, my previous guest, Edgar Gonzalez, who is one of the Fox Sports broadcasters for MLB, he was he was blocking his mind and he couldn't think about any question. So I'm just gonna choose a random question that one of my
okay.
have asked to other guests. So, what's the best advice that you have ever received? And it could be from your dad, your mom, a boss, a coworker, whoever.
Ooh. I'm trying to think of, there's so many good things.
You choose one. You choose one.
Let's see. I will say the best advice I've gotten recently was to this is really silly, but this is literally the one thing that's coming to my mind right now is to buy and get life insurance. I was going to say something very deep and profound, Luis, but it's really important to start thinking and planning for, that next generation and your own financial wealth and your own kind of financial security. And maybe it's because I'm just starting to think about those things now in my career. Financial education is super important, right? When I was a kid, I had no one to really teach me about savings and Roth plans and interest rates and debt and life insurance and all of those things. And I think the more and more I educate myself as a young woman, as a young professional woman about financial awareness and security, it's super important and something that I hope to pass on to my kids should I ever have kids in the near future. But definitely look into life insurance. It could be a great way to supplement any lines of credit for you in the future. And of course, setting yourself and your family up for long-term success.
Yeah. And what's a question that you would like to ask to my next guest?
Yeah, it's kind of saying in the same realm. What was your what advice would you give yourself if you could go back and meet your teenage self? What advice would you give your teenage self?
Okay. And the last thing, I already asked you a lot of questions. Ask me one or two about whatever, and I'm gonna answer that. But if one of my previous guests already asked me that question, you will need to choose a different one.
Okay, that sounds good. Um, Luis, what inspired you to do these podcasts?
I think trying to share my experiences to other people who want to go to the US to study, because that was the main thing, the main reason why I created this podcast, right? It was almost 4 years ago, before the pandemic. It was my goal for 2020. So I started this podcast the first week of 2020, and I didn't know like I was gonna be doing it for like almost 4 years, right? 4 years, right? And what inspired me was like many people wanted to go to the US to pursue like a major, a career, or even like, I don't know, probably other goals. And I was like, I'm gonna share my experiences because when I first wanted to come to the US, I didn't know anyone who could have told me the path, or I didn't know anyone with a journey that I have built throughout these almost 6 years. So I was like, I'm gonna start sharing my experiences, what I have learned, and if I would be attending conferences, conventions through like my community college at that time, I would be like, okay, so in this convention with Haku in Chicago, I learned about tips on how to succeed in interviews. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about interviews or personal branding or how to successfully network with big people or stuff like that. So the things that I was learning at college, I was sharing these things in this podcast, and then I was like, I'm gonna start bringing experts in their areas, right? So I started with baseball because I'm a huge baseball person. So I was like, okay, so I'm gonna start interviewing like baseball players, and then I started asking other CEOs or business people, and sometimes musicians, singers, or yeah, like whoever has something to add, to contribute, is like, if it's gonna be an interesting conversation, I'm down because there's gonna be people who can learn from that. So that's kind of like what inspired me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for doing what you do and talking to people of all sorts of walks of life. And
Yeah.
I know you have another engagement to get to, but Luis, it was such a pleasure chatting with you today. And yeah, looking forward to seeing the podcast.
Thank you. For those people that are listening, please don't forget to share this episode in your Instagram stories. You can find me at Luis Carlos Estrada dos or two. And for those who want to follow you, Nereyda, how can they find you in LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever you want to send them?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow me on LinkedIn, of course, and Nereyda Esparza at LinkedIn. And I also have a website, neredaesparza.com, so .com.
Okay, before we say goodbye, anything you want to add?
Not at all. I think we covered it. But I love the podcast. I'll definitely be listening in and wishing you a great semester ahead.
Awesome. So, for those people who are listening to the end of this episode, thank you so much for staying with us today, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.